Volume 1, Book 11, number 652. Narrated by Sa'al bin Sa'd as-Sa'idi. Allah's apostle went to establish peace among Bani Amr bin Auf. In the meantime the time of prayer was due, and the Mu'adhin went to Abu Bakr and said, "Will you lead the prayer, so that I may pronounce the Qama?" Abu Bakr replied in the affirmative and led the prayer. Allah's apostle came while the people were still praying, and he entered the rows of the praying people till he stood in the first row. The people clapped their hands. Abu Bakr never glanced sideways in his prayer, but when the people continued clapping, Abu Bakr looked and saw Allah's apostle. Allah's apostle beckoned him to stay at his place. Abu Bakr raised his hands and thanked Allah for that order of Allah's apostle, and then he retreated till he reached the first row. Allah's apostle went forward and led the prayer. When Allah's apostle finished the prayer, he said, "O Abu Bakr, what prevented you from staying when I ordered you to do so?" Abu Bakr replied, "How can Ibn Abi Kafir, Abu Bakr, dare to lead the prayer in the presence of Allah's apostle?" Then Allah's apostle said, "Why did you clap so much? If something happens to anyone during his prayer, he should say Subhan Allah. If he says so, he will be attended to, for clapping is for women." Volume 1, Book 11, number 653. Narrated by Malik bin Huwaith. We went to the Prophet, and we were all young men, and stayed with him for about 20 nights. The Prophet was very merciful. He said, "When you return home, impart religious teachings to your families, and tell them to offer perfectly such and such a prayer at such and such a time, and such a prayer at such and such a time. And the time of the prayer one of you should pronounce the Adhan, and the oldest of you should lead the prayer." Volume 1, Book 11, number 654. Narrated by Itban bin Malik al-Ansari. The Prophet came to my house and asked permission for entering, and I allowed him. He asked, "Where do you like me to pray in your house?" I pointed to a place which I liked. He stood up for prayer, and we aligned behind him, and he finished the prayer with Taslim, and we did the same. Volume 1, Book 11, number 655. Narrated by Ubaydullah ibn Abdullah bin Utbah. I went to Aisha and asked her to describe to me the illness of Allah's apostle. Aisha said, "Yes. The Prophet became seriously ill and asked whether the people had prayed. We replied, 'No. O Allah's apostle, they are waiting for you.' He added, 'Put water for me in a trough.' Aisha added, 'We did so. He took a bath and tried to get up but fainted. When he recovered, he again asked whether the people had prayed. We said, 'No. They are waiting for you. O Allah's apostle,' he again said, 'Put water in a trough for me.' He sat down and took a bath and tried to get up but fainted again. Then he recovered and said, 'Have the people prayed?' We replied, 'No. They are waiting for you. O Allah's apostle.' He said, 'Put water for me in the trough.' Then he sat down and washed himself and tried to get up, but he fainted. When he recovered, he asked, 'Have the people prayed?' We said, 'No. They are waiting for you. O Allah's apostle.' The people were in the mosque waiting for the Prophet for the Isha prayer. The Prophet sent for Abu Bakr to lead the people in the prayer. The messenger went to Abu Bakr and said, "Allah's apostle orders you to lead the people in the prayer." Abu Bakr was a soft-hearted man, so he asked Umar to lead the prayer, but Umar replied, "You are more rightful." So Abu Bakr led the prayer in those days. When the Prophet felt a bit better, he came out for the Zuhr prayer with the help of two persons, one of whom was Al-Abbas, while Abu Bakr was leading the people in the prayer. When Abu Bakr saw him, he wanted to retreat, but the Prophet beckoned him not to do so and asked him to make him sit beside Abu Bakr, and they did so. Abu Bakr was following the Prophet in the prayer, and the people were following Abu Bakr. The Prophet prayed sitting. Ubaydullah added, I went to Abdullah bin Abbas and asked him, shall I tell you what Aisha has told me about the fatal illness of the Prophet? Ibn Abbas said, go ahead. I told him her narration and he did not deny anything of it but asked whether Aisha told me the name of the second person who helped the Prophet, along with Al-Abbas. I said, no. He said, he was Ali ibn Abi Talib. Volume 1, Book 11, number 656. Narrated by Aisha, the mother of the believers. Allah's apostle during his illness prayed at his house while sitting, whereas some people prayed behind him standing. The Prophet beckoned them to sit down. On completion of the prayer, he said, the Imam is to be followed. Bow when he bows, raise up your heads, stand erect when he raises his head, and when he says, Sami'a Allahu liman hamida, Allah heard those who sent praises to him. Say then, Rabbana wa laka al-hamd, O our Lord, all the praises are for you, and if he prays sitting then pray sitting. Volume 1, Book 11, number 657. Narrated by Anas bin Malik. Once Allah's apostle rode a horse and fell down, and the right side of his body was injured. He offered one of the prayers while sitting, and we also prayed behind him sitting. When he completed the prayer, he said, the Imam is to be followed. Pray standing if he prays standing, and bow when he bows, rise when he rises, and if he says, Sami'a Allahu liman hamida, say then, Rabbana wa lakal hamd, and pray standing if he prays standing, and pray sitting, all of you, if he prays sitting. Humayd said, the saying of the Prophet, pray sitting, if he, Imam, prays sitting, was said in his former illness, during his early life. But the Prophet prayed sitting afterwards, in the last illness. And the people were praying standing behind him, and the Prophet did not order them to sit. We should follow the latest actions of the Prophet. Volume 1, Book 11, number 658. Narrated by Al-Bara. And he was not a liar, when Allah's apostle said, Sami'a Allahu liman hamida, none of us bent his back for prostrations, till the Prophet prostrated, and then we would prostrate after him. Volume 1, Book 11, number 659. Narrated by Abu Ishaq. As above. Volume 1, Book 11, number 660. Narrated by Abu Hurairah. The Prophet said, isn't he who raises his head before the Imam afraid that Allah may transform his head into that of a donkey, or his face into that of a donkey? Volume 1, Book 11, number 661. Narrated by Ibn Umar. When the earliest emigrants came to Al-Uzba, a place in Kuba, before the arrival of the Prophet Salim, the slave of Abu Hudhaifa, who knew the Quran more than the others, used to lead them in prayer. Volume 1, Book 11, number 662. Narrated by Anas. The Prophet said, listen and obey your chief, even if an Ethiopian whose head is like a raisin were made your chief. Volume 1, Book 11, number 663. Narrated by Abu Hurairah. Allah's apostle said, if the Imam leads the prayer correctly, then he and you will receive the rewards, but if he makes a mistake in the prayer, then you will receive the reward for the prayer, and the sin will be his. Volume 1, Book 11, number 664. Narrated by Anas bin Malik. The Prophet said to Abu Dar, listen and obey your chief, even if he is an Ethiopian with a head like a raisin. Volume 1, Book 11, number 665. Narrated by Ibn Abbas. Once I passed the night in the house of my aunt Maimuna. Allah's apostle offered the Isha prayer and then came to the house and offered 4 rakat and slept. Later on, he woke up and stood for the prayer, and I stood on his left side. He drew me to his right and prayed 5 rakat and then 2. He then slept till I heard him snoring, or heard his breath sounds. Afterwards he went out for the morning prayer.